In the summer of 1942, one city would decide the fate of World War II. Its name was Stalingrad. For over 200 days, soldiers and civilians fought through ruins, fire, hunger, and freezing cold. Nearly 2 million people were killed, wounded, or captured. It became one of the deadliest battles in human history. And it started because of one man's obsession. Adolf Hitler needed this city, not just for strategy, for the name. Destroying a city named after Stalin would humiliate his greatest enemy. But the real reasons ran much deeper than pride. To understand why, we need to go back to 1942. By this point, Germany had already invaded the Soviet Union. The operation was called Barbarossa, and it began in June 1941. Germany drove deep into Soviet territory with terrifying speed. But the winter of 1941 had stopped the advance cold. The German army failed to take Moscow. Hitler was furious. He needed a new plan. And in 1942, that plan pointed south. Here is what Hitler understood. The Soviet war machine needed oil. Without oil, Soviet tanks stop moving. Without oil, Soviet planes stop flying. Without oil, the entire Soviet military collapses. The oil fields were in the Caucasus region, far to the south. If Germany seized those oil fields, the Soviet Union would slowly die. And there was another target just as critical, the Volga River. Imagine a massive supply line running through the heart of the Soviet Union. That river fed troops, weapons, and food to the entire Eastern Front. Cut the Volga, and the Soviet supply system breaks apart. Stalingrad sat right on the banks of the Volga. Controlling Stalingrad meant controlling the river. This was why Hitler turned south in 1942. The summer offensive was called Operation Blue. Hundreds of thousands of German soldiers began moving southeast. The plan was enormous, almost impossibly ambitious. Germany's Army Group South would split into two separate groups. Army Group A would drive toward the Caucasus oil fields. Army Group B would push toward Stalingrad and the Volga. On paper, the plan was bold and logical. But here is the first problem. Germany was splitting its forces across a massive front. Each army group would need to move fast and fight independently. Any delay, any mistake, and the whole strategy could unravel. But in the summer of 1942, the Germans were still moving fast. Soviet forces fell back under the German advance. Entire Soviet units were encircled and destroyed. Hitler believed the Soviet army was nearly broken. He was wrong, but he didn't know it yet. By late July, German forces were approaching the bend of the Don River. Stalingrad was now directly in their path. Leading the push toward Stalingrad was the German 6th Army. Its commander was General Friedrich Paulus. Paulus was meticulous, careful, and deeply loyal to Hitler. He had over 300,000 men under his command. With air support, artillery, and armor, the 6th Army seemed unstoppable. The Soviet forces defending the approaches to Stalingrad were badly outgunned. They fell back. They retreated. They took massive casualties. Stalin watched this with horror. On July 28, 1942, he issued Order Number 227. Its title was simple: not one step back. Any Soviet soldier who retreated without orders would be shot. Blocking units were placed behind Soviet lines to enforce it. The message was brutal and clear. Stalingrad would not fall without a fight. By August, the Germans had reached the outskirts of the city. Then, on August 23, 1942, the Luftwaffe unleashed hell. German bombers filled the sky above Stalingrad. Hundreds of aircraft dropped thousands of bombs on the city. Over days of bombing, large sections of Stalingrad were reduced to rubble. Tens of thousands of civilians were killed. The city burned. Buildings collapsed. Streets disappeared under debris. The Volga itself appeared to be on fire from burning oil. People who survived described it as the end of the world. But what happened next surprised everyone, including the Germans. The ruins made the city harder to attack, not easier. Bombed buildings became fortresses. Rubble became cover. Every destroyed street became a maze of ambush points. The German advantage in open field warfare was suddenly gone. And this was where the real battle began. German troops entered the city in early September 1942. What they found was unlike any battlefield they had ever seen. There were no front lines, no clear positions, no open ground, just ruins, smoke, shadows, and death around every corner. The Soviets defending the city were organized into the 62nd Army. Their commander was General Vasily Chuikov. Chuikov was tough, determined, and completely unafraid of risk. He understood something that would prove decisive. If his troops stayed close to the Germans, the Luftwaffe couldn't bomb them. German pilots could not drop bombs on positions mixed with their own soldiers. This became the Soviet strategy: hug the enemy. Get so close that German air power became useless. It was brutal, it was terrifying, but it worked. Chuikov called it clinging to the enemy's chest, like a button. Inside Stalingrad, fighting happened room by room, floor by floor. A building could be attacked, lost, recaptured, and lost again in one day. Soldiers fought in basements, sewers, staircases, and collapsed rooftops. For many newly arrived Soviet soldiers, survival was measured in hours. And yet, they kept fighting. The city became known to German soldiers as the Rattenkrieg, the Rat War, because they were fighting like rats in the rubble. Let's look at some of the key locations inside the city. Mamayev Kurgan was a hill that dominated the center of Stalingrad. Whoever controlled this hill could direct fire across the entire city. Both sides threw soldiers at it again and again. The hill changed hands many times over months of fighting. The soil was so saturated with metal and blood that almost nothing grew there afterward. Another critical location was the grain elevator, a massive concrete silo on the southern edge of the city. A small group of Soviet soldiers held it against far larger German forces. The fighting inside lasted for days. German soldiers who took part described the experience as nightmarish. Then there was Pavlov's house, a simple apartment building near the city center. Sergeant Yakov Pavlov and a small group of soldiers fortified it into a strong point. They held that building for nearly 2 months. The German losses trying to take Pavlov's house were enormous. Chuikov later claimed Germany lost more men at Pavlov's house than capturing Paris. In the northern part of the city were the great factories: the Red October factory, the Barricadi factory, and the tractor factory. These massive industrial buildings became some of the most contested ground in history. Workers had been building tanks in the tractor factory until the day German troops entered. Then the workers picked up rifles and fought alongside soldiers. Inside the factory halls, men fought between half-finished machines and steel beams. There were no front lines inside those walls, just survival. The fighting went on for weeks, then months. Every day, Soviet forces crossed the Volga under fire to reinforce Chuikov's army. German bombers and artillery tried to destroy the crossing points. Soviet soldiers crossed at night, clinging to rafts and small boats. Many drowned, many were killed crossing, but they kept coming. Meanwhile, the Germans were exhausted and taking terrible losses. Each building they captured came at enormous cost. They were winning ground, but they were bleeding out doing it. Then, the snipers made things even worse. Inside Stalingrad, Soviet snipers became legends of psychological warfare. The most famous was Vasily Zaitsev. Zaitsev was said to have killed over 200 enemy soldiers. Snipers didn't just kill. They made German soldiers afraid to move, afraid to look out a window, afraid to cross open ground. The psychological pressure was constant and crushing. German officers began to understand something terrifying. Even if they captured every building in Stalingrad, they might not win. The Soviets would keep fighting from the rubble, from the river, from anywhere. But what the Germans didn't know was this: the Soviets were planning something enormous. While Chuikov bled the Germans dry inside the city, Soviet commanders looked at the larger picture. General Georgy Zhukov and General Alexander Vasilevsky had been secretly planning a massive counterattack. Not inside Stalingrad, around it. Look at how the German forces were positioned. The 6th Army was deep inside Stalingrad, totally focused on capturing the city. But their flanks, the sides of their position, were dangerously exposed. On the northern flank, Romanian forces. On the southern flank, more Romanian forces, along with Italian and Hungarian units. These Axis allies were less equipped, less experienced, and less motivated than German troops. They were spread thin across enormous stretches of open steppe. They had little armor, limited artillery, and almost no reserves. The Soviets had noticed, and they had been quietly building up massive reserves of men and tanks. 3 Soviet fronts, over 1 million soldiers, thousands of tanks, guns, and aircraft, all positioned out of sight, hidden from German reconnaissance. The plan was called Operation Uranus. The idea was devastating in its simplicity. Two massive Soviet armored forces would strike the weak flanks simultaneously. The Romanians and other Axis allies would collapse. The Soviet columns would then sweep around behind the German Sixth Army, and the trap would close. The question was, did the Germans see it coming? Some German officers warned that the flanks were too weak. Some intelligence reports suggested major Soviet buildups, but Hitler dismissed the warnings. He believed the Soviets were too exhausted and too depleted to launch a major offensive. He was catastrophically wrong. On November 19, 1942, Operation Uranus began. In the early morning, Soviet artillery opened up on the northern flank. The bombardment was overwhelming. The Romanian lines shattered almost immediately. Soviet tank columns poured through the gaps at terrifying speed. The next day, the southern pincer attacked. Again, Romanian forces collapsed under the Soviet assault. The two Soviet forces drove deep into the open steppe. They were racing toward each other. The Germans inside Stalingrad had no idea what was happening on their flanks. Then, on November 23, 1942, the two Soviet columns met. At a town called Kalak on the Don River, the circle was complete. The entire German Sixth Army was surrounded. Over 300,000 German soldiers were now trapped inside a shrinking pocket, cut off from supplies, cut off from reinforcement, cut off from escape. The hunters had become the hunted. Now Paulus had a choice that could still have saved his army: break out immediately, fight through the Soviet encirclement before it solidified. Some of his generals begged him to do exactly that. The breakout would have been costly, but it was still possible in those first days. Then Hitler made the decision that sealed the fate of the Sixth Army. He ordered Paulus to hold his position. Stalingrad must not be abandoned. Not one step back. Paulus, loyal and obedient, obeyed. But there was another promise that gave Hitler confidence. Hermann Göring, head of the Luftwaffe, stepped forward with a bold claim. He promised that the Luftwaffe could supply the trapped Sixth Army by air. The army needed at least 300 tons a day just to survive, and far more if it hoped to keep fighting effectively. Göring promised he could deliver it. Almost every Luftwaffe general told him it was impossible. The weather was turning brutal. Soviet fighters were growing stronger. The distances were enormous. The landing strips inside the pocket were few, but Göring insisted. And Hitler believed him. It was a lie that would doom hundreds of thousands of men. At best, German transport planes managed to deliver around 100 tons per day, sometimes far less, often almost nothing. Soldiers inside the pocket began to starve. Daily rations were cut again and again. Men ate their horses. Then they ate rats. The temperature outside dropped to minus 30 degrees Celsius. Soldiers had summer uniforms. They had no winter gear. Frostbite tore through the ranks. Men lost fingers, toes, noses, and ears to the cold. Still, Hitler ordered them to hold. Outside the pocket, Germany made one last attempt to rescue the Sixth Army. Field Marshal Erich von Manstein launched Operation Winter Storm. In December 1942, a powerful German armored force drove toward Stalingrad from the southwest. At one point, Manstein's relief column was only 48 kilometers from the pocket. If Paulus had ordered a breakout toward them, a junction might have been possible. Some historians believe it could have worked, but Hitler forbade the breakout. Paulus refused to move without Hitler's permission, and the Soviet forces overwhelmed Manstein's column. The relief attempt failed. The pocket was sealed again. There would be no rescue. Inside the pocket, the situation became catastrophic. Men were dying by the thousands every day, from starvation, from cold, from wounds, from despair. Hospitals were overflowing. Medicine had run out. German soldiers who had stormed across Europe now begged for scraps of food. The city they had fought so hard to take was now their prison. In January 1943, Soviet forces launched the final assault on the pocket. Operation Ring began on January 10th. Soviet forces drove into the shrinking German perimeter from all sides. German resistance was crumbling. The men had nothing left. Paulus sent desperate messages to Hitler, describing the catastrophic reality. Hitler responded by promoting Paulus to Field Marshal. It was a signal. No German Field Marshal had ever surrendered. Hitler expected Paulus to fight to the death. On January 31st, 1943, Friedrich Paulus surrendered to Soviet forces. He became the first German field marshal ever taken prisoner. Hitler was furious. He called it a betrayal. The remaining German forces in the northern pocket surrendered 2 days later. On February 2nd, 1943, the Battle of Stalingrad officially ended. The numbers were staggering. Of the over 300,000 German and Axis soldiers trapped in the pocket, very few survived. Around 90,000 were taken prisoner in the final surrender. Of those 90,000, only about 6,000 ever returned home. Most died in Soviet captivity from disease, starvation, and exhaustion. On the Soviet side, the casualties were even larger in total. Estimates suggest nearly 500,000 Soviet soldiers died in the battle and its surrounding operations. Total casualties for both sides, including civilians, exceeded 1.5 million people. It was one of the bloodiest battles in human history. News of the defeat spread slowly across Germany. At first, Nazi propaganda tried to hide the disaster, but the truth was impossible to bury forever. Families waited for letters that would never arrive. For many Germans, Stalingrad broke their confidence completely. The war no longer felt distant or victorious. It now felt endless, cold, and doomed. In the Soviet Union, the mood was different. Stalingrad became proof that Germany could be beaten. Posters, newspapers, and speeches celebrated the defenders. The ruined city became a symbol of survival. But victory had come at an almost unbearable cost. Entire neighborhoods had vanished beneath ash and stone. Thousands of families had been destroyed forever. The Volga city had survived, but barely, and its name now echoed across the world. But why did it matter so much beyond the numbers? Before Stalingrad, Germany had seemed nearly unstoppable. It had swept through Poland, France, North Africa, and deep into the Soviet Union. The German military machine seemed like it could not be defeated. Stalingrad shattered that image forever. For the first time, an entire German army had been encircled and destroyed. The myth of German invincibility was gone. For the Soviet Union, Stalingrad became a symbol of everything. Of resistance, of sacrifice, of the will to survive no matter the cost. Vasily Chuikov and the 62nd Army had held the city against seemingly impossible odds. The crossing of the Volga had never stopped. The city had never completely fallen. For Germany, Stalingrad began a strategic collapse that never reversed. After the loss of the 6th Army, Germany was permanently on the defensive in the east. The initiative had shifted to the Soviet Union. The road from Stalingrad would eventually lead straight to Berlin. But that road was still long, and the suffering was far from over. What had been decided at Stalingrad was something fundamental. The outcome of World War II had changed direction. In a ruined city, on the banks of the Volga, the most powerful army in the world had been broken. Not by luck, not by chance, but by the refusal of ordinary people to stop fighting. Soldiers who crossed a river every night, knowing they might not survive. Snipers who held positions alone in the rubble. Workers who built tanks in the morning and fought with rifles in the afternoon. A general who stood on the western bank of the Volga with nowhere to retreat. The Battle of Stalingrad was not just a military turning point. It was a demonstration of what human endurance can achieve, and it is something that history will never forget.